Technology is huge. So really, I mean, we can't talk about technology without talking about transparency. The key word in procurement to me is really traceability and transparency. Those are really keys to what I think is the future of procurement and sourcing. To achieve true transparency, you need full disclosure of your supply chain, from raw materials all the way to the finished product. We need factories to disclose their full BOMs and the suppliers that are involved in that supply chain.
Hi, everyone. This is John Pavia from Smarter Sourcing, and welcome back to another episode. And today we have with us Yelena Mogelefsky, and she is the Senior Vice President of Production and Sourcing for Intimates at Komar Brands, based in New York City. Yelena, thank you so much for doing this with us today.
You're welcome. We're actually based in New Jersey now. So
New Jersey, okay. Well, I was reading something that said something about I thought it was the city. Did it used to be in the city?
Used to be in the city, yeah. Right before COVID, moved over to Jersey City. So now we're based in Jersey City. So thank you for having me on the show.
Absolutely. I was saying before, I don't think we've had anybody from the fashion industry here yet.
Which I love being the first from the fashion industry, because really procurement and production and sourcing and in apparel, I mean.
Yeah, and my wife, if she was here right now, she'd be laughing because I've become like this. I'm not a fashionista, but like when the Oscars are coming up, I will be the one to be watching the red carpet as they're walking in, and well, I grew up with two older sisters, so I was always my mom would say to me, when your sisters come and they're going on a date and they come down the stairs, don't just say, "Oh, you look good." Tell them, what you really think. So I got into, well, that belt doesn't go with your shoes. So,
some brutal honesty there.
Or you need a necklace or something. But anyways, so you've been there for a while now, what, 14 years?
Yeah, I've been there for 14 years now.
So tell us how you got there. Where did your journey start, and then bring us to today?
Great. So my journey started at FIT, the Fashion Institute of Technology, right in New York City. As a high school student, I grew up in Brooklyn. I kind of loved fashion, and it was a natural course to go to FIT. I was so excited. I did high school programs there and really loved the school. So went to FIT. One of the things that I think that they don't tell you is that there are so many career opportunities. And when you leave school, you don't really know exactly what you're going to be doing. So I have a degree in marketing and international trade. And I got my first job at a manufacturing company doing children's wear. It was amazing. I learned so much in my first 4 years of my job. And then I went into the corporate world and I started working for companies like Sara Lee, which was an amazing company owning lots of brands, Hanes, Bally, Playtex, and really kind of expanded my career there, learning about fabrics and patterns.
What were your roles there? Were you in sourcing or were you in marketing?
So in Sara Lee, I did a lot of different roles, which was incredible. I actually got to do even a little bit of design, all those little 10-pack panties. Every single one of those patterns is handpicked and designed. So it was quite incredible. When you graduate in the fashion industry, the world is so vast and there's so many different career paths that you can go down. And then I did move into the sourcing and product development path at Sara Lee.
And was that by choice, or they just needed somebody, or that was an area that you wanted to go into?
That was the area that I wanted to go. That was my expertise. I finished with international trade. I really wanted to travel. I really wanted to visit factories. That was where I was heading. And Sara Lee definitely gave me the opportunity to do that. We developed a department that set the trends, picked fabrics, worked on different pad development, and really worked on true sourcing and product development for the entire company, which was amazing. After that, I was lucky enough that I got a job and I moved into retail. I actually worked for Foot Locker. So once again, it really proved to me that I can go from wholesale to retail. And that was an incredible opportunity, because you really realize when you're the retailer, you hold all the power. You hold the writing pen. You can dictate your own deliveries. You can dictate how the factory when they ship, how they ship, the quantity they ship. You work so closely with your merchandising and your buying teams when you're working from the retail end. And there I actually did. So everybody knows Foot Locker as a sneaker store, but I did all the sourcing and product development for anything that was private label clothing. So when you walked into the store and you saw 5-pack of t-shirts, stacked high, or all the sweatshirts. And I worked on so many different product categories. Once again, you don't have to be pigeonholed to one product category. Though I did intimates and I do intimates now at Foot Locker, I did belts and hats and jeans and sweatshirts. So wovens and knits. And I worked with so many different countries from Peru all the way to Pakistan and Madagascar. So it was a really great opportunity working for a retailer. And then I got tapped for Komar 14 years ago. They were an incredible over 105-year-old sleepwear company who didn't have an intimate apparel division. And I was lucky enough with an incredible merchandiser and designer and president to help really entrepreneurially build this division really from nothing. We started the intimate apparel division, and now we're well over, $150 million division, which is incredible.
So that was, I know you've been there 14 years, but is that around when it started the intimates division?
That's exactly when they started. I got called in, to interview for at that point, the VP position, to head up the intimate sourcing and product development for them. So they really had very small intimates, a couple programs here and there.
And just curious, having nothing to do with, has more to do with risk taking, career risk taking. Did you say to yourself, and I don't know if it's against the Komar's rule book to mention the company whose name shall not be mentioned. I don't know if it's a thing like that with like Valdemort, but the company known as Victoria's Secrets. Was there a moment where you said, "Boy, I don't know if this is a good career move. You're moving into intimates," and at that time, they sort of own the space. Was that ever a part of your calculus, or you saw what is clear now, which is for whatever reason they don't own the space anymore, and you guys, and along with a couple others, have made huge inroads in that area and are the dominant players?
Yeah, listen, when you go into a new position that's created for you, there's always, a risk factor because the position's created for you. But knowing what a great reputation the company had, that made me feel so much more secure. Just knowing that this is a privately held 105-year-old company who really owns incredible brands, licenses incredible brands, has a great reputation in the industry, made me feel really good. And I knew the president heading it up, the merchandiser heading it up, were all talented, incredible people, and that we can grow this together. And it's exactly what we did. We set out to grow a division, and we did. And it's a collaboration of licenses. It's a collaboration of companies we acquired, private label. So we do a lot of private label for customers, so our portfolio is so mixed now that it's really incredible.
Yeah, I bring it up because a lot of the folks the feedback I get, I know it's from people who are a little bit younger than me, oftentimes just starting on their journey in the sourcing, procurement, supply chain world, some of whom didn't plan on doing that when they left business school or undergrad or whatever. And so I think it's important for them. And I know you do quite a bit of mentoring, and you're part of Chief, which grooms, I think, young female executives.
Female executives, exactly.
And so I think it's important for both men and women who are especially in this field to hear from people like you, especially in situations where, it wasn't like you were going into and starting an intimates line for a company that already had lots of brand penetration in that channel. This was a new channel they were going into. And I think it's important. I have 4 kids, and I'm like, you got to be able to take risk, calculated risk, but you got to be able to sometimes, if you really want to make a quantum leap in your career, sometimes you got to take some risk. And you did.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was a risk, but it's a risk that paid off. And, a risk that I was happy that I took. I'm in a great position now, and I love my job, and I love what I do.
Tell us about your job now. Tell us about tell us about your team, And tell us a little bit about your the day in the life.
Sure. So my job now, so I'm SVP of production and sourcing. Um, really what I tell, it's actually really funny because if this was my kids' class and I walked in, I would say to them, I'm a fireman. That's what I used to walk into. It was hard to explain what production and sourcing is, but what it was easy to explain was that I was a fireman. And every day when I open up my email, I don't know if that fire is going to be small or that fire is going to be big, but it's all about problem solving. And every day my emails have, it could be a thread that doesn't match, or there could be an avalanche that hit my container, as big as that. And they're all just problem solving skills. And every day we're trying to develop the best product at the best cost, the best quality. I'm now lucky enough that I've stepped into have a focus on sustainability. Sustainability is a really big focus for Komar, really for the industry. So Komar's following suit, and it's a huge focal point. And I'm lucky enough that now in my role, I do sustainability as well. I have a global team. So we've really set up our team to be global. So I have people that report to me here in the States, and I have people that report to me in Sri Lanka, in Hong Kong, really all over the world where we have our offices. So it's a whole, when you're working, it's a whole different way of working when your team is not situated in one place.
So in terms of the organization and both the sourcing and procurement folks that are doing that work for Komar, what groups report up into you? Which ones don't?
So reporting into me is really product development and sourcing. So it's front end sourcing, product development, and back end, what we call sourcing and production. So really our first step is developing the product. We work so closely cross-functionally with all of our teams. We work with sales, we work with design, we work with the merchandising team, we work with the packaging team. So reporting into me, our first step is our product development. So I have a team of people that do the product development, send it out for costing. We get the costings back. Once the costing is complete, that's when a PO is ran, a purchase order is ran. That's when we move into what we call the production side of things. And that's where the true follow-up begins.
Got it.
Really following up every single step of the production cycle. So what doesn't report into me is logistics. So logistics is a separate department that we work hand in hand, we're partners with, but does not report into me.
So in your world, it's got to be a little bit different. So and when I say that, what's become very clear to me that is since the pandemic, what big and small companies do a lot of now that I guess the big ones did before, but not as much. But the contingency planning that they do, that everybody's doing now for the what ifs, and especially after the pandemic, what are those contingency plans if you can't get, this core ingredient or whatever the case may be. But, I've spoken to so many people now who, they're hiring a lot of people out of the military because they want people who have a lot of experience with wargaming and, how to build contingency plans and how to implement them at the, by the press of a button. In your world with fashion, you've always got to be thinking about what's around the next corner a couple of seasons away, like for the spring season. I mean, fashion is always.
Oh yeah. I mean, we're working in, we're already in spring 26 and doing fall 27 at this point. So we are definitely thinking way ahead. And that makes things very difficult when it comes to production, especially with today's geopolitical state that we're in. I just finished, for example, we just announced a 10% tariff. Right? I just finished literally negotiating with every single factory, rewriting every single purchase order just yesterday to get the information and the news that there might be an additional 10% tariff. I mean, when we talk about changing, I mean, we don't know what one day to the next day is going to bring.
When you think about your career, have there been any crisis moments? You can use the pandemic if you want, but in addition to that, that actually helped shape your abilities and your outlook on sourcing, preparedness, et cetera, later on in your career?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have a crisis story. I mean, I have quite a few, but there's always quite a few. I mean, that's really what our job is. Like I said, it's putting out fires, putting out crises. So there's always something that goes on. But as an adjunct professor, I teach at FIT and I tell the students all the time, one of the biggest things that I like to teach is I go into class and actually give them real life scenarios that happened to me that day. That's exactly how I teach because there's something that happens every day. So I have enough material. And we do real life crises. So I always tell this one story where I got an incredible opportunity. We secured an entire private label program for a wonderful new contemporary brand. And I worked with a factory in China that I worked with. They were new. And I thought I vetted them to what I believe I vetted them. And I gave them 3 small test orders. They did great. Okay. They shipped. There were hiccups, nothing that was out of the ordinary. And we shipped the product and everything was great. Come this very large contemporary order.
I know where this one's going.
And I said, you know what? I'm going to try this factory. I visited them. I mean, firsthand visited them. So I did all the right steps. They were compliant, sustainable, great factory. I placed this program there, and the program was nominated suppliers. So when we talk about procurement and sourcing, you can buy an FOB package from a factory and have them be responsible for developing all your trims and fabrics, or designers nominate. This was a very higher end contemporary group, and we nominated all the suppliers. So we said, you have to buy the fabric from this person, the elastic from that. Factory said, no problem, no problem. My team was following up with the factory, as we always did. Factory was telling us everything's in order. This is, they were a little slow, but things were coming. All and behold, literally the day before the factory closes for Chinese New Year, and the order was supposed to ship the day they opened from Chinese New Year. So like early March, and this was end of January, I get an email that says they did not have the finances to pay our nominated suppliers, and they won't release the fabrics and trims. And so what was an FOB factory, I had to jump in and pay for all the supplies, all the trims. Our company had to, wire money. And they became a CMT factory. They just became a cut, make, and trim factory after they didn't have the finances. They didn't reveal to me they didn't have the finances. They didn't ask for help. And, it was a big aha moment to me to realize that my team needs to do more. They can't just rely on the factory. We need to be digging into the supply chain. We need to be following up. Did you get your order? Did you get your payment? And it really made me, reconfigure how my department works from that one crisis moment.
And probably for the rest of your career, whenever you've even debated about using a new supplier like that,
it hurts. I always come back to this thought because it shouldn't have happened. And it was one of those things where I couldn't believe that this is the outcome. Definitely reconfigured how we work go forward.
So how do you measure success? And now today, given you all your experience, right? And that's a very broad term and a broad concept, I get. But generally speaking, what's the framework that you use to measure success of your team on a sort of an ongoing basis?
Sourcing success to me is so different now. It's not just about the best cost and the fastest delivery. That's not like success anymore. Right now, it's more holistic when you really look at how you gauge success. It's more about cost aversion, like not getting chargebacks. Did we ship a full container? If the factory, I have an X factory date, they must ship on time because our logistics department is working so hard to consolidate in 40 cube containers. And we're working hard to consolidate. So if a factory's late and they were supposed to go in that container, now we're not filling the container, we're losing money. So we're looking at different kinds of ways that we're actually measuring success. Another way is carns. Is the factory shipping the smallest possible carton, but still keeping the integrity and the quality of my product? There's no reason to ship air. And that equals sustainability, not just cost savings. You're saving the planet too. So, I find that now we measure success differently, where success used to be measured at, did you get the lowest cost and the fastest delivery?
Right.
It's not that anymore.
And technology, how does that factor into the world today versus when you started this journey?
Technology is huge. So really, we can't talk about technology without talking about transparency. The key word in procurement to me is really traceability and transparency. Those are really keys to what I think is the future of procurement and sourcing. To achieve true transparency, you need full disclosure of your supply chain, from raw materials all the way to the finished product. We need factories to disclose their full BOMs and the suppliers that are involved in that supply chain. And in order to do that, we're working with a technology company right now to build a platform for exactly that. We need full transparency in the supply chain. And the only way that's going to happen is with technology.
And so now when you see, I know you teach, and when you see these students and these younger professionals coming through the ranks, what's the talent gap that you're seeing where you're saying to yourself, at the school level, at the training level, we need to do a better job of preparing them by doing and fill in the blank? What are we not doing currently even with the students who are in, taking classes and are majoring in supply chain management and things that you would think? What do we need to do a better job at in terms of getting them prepared for the world that you live in today, if they aspire to then, get into a leadership position like yours?
I think first is really what you just hit on, which is technology. We talk about the technologies that are available, but giving the students hands-on practice with the technology. Something as simple as a PLM system, like a product line, management system. Having students actually work on that system. Having students, do real life projects. We kind of teach what technology is about, but technology is so new in the fashion industry and kind of just in the manufacturing and, the costing structures. We need students to get hands-on in technology. That's first of all. Second of all, is like I said before, the great at memorizing, but real life scenarios. I think that's what makes me a popular, professor at FIT, is that I come in and give real life scenarios. How would you solve this problem? How would you solve this problem? If, the elastic wasn't correct, what do we do? What does commercially acceptable mean? What does consumer acceptability mean? All these terms that, we kind of teach a little bit black and white and memorization and, kids, but really learning to deep dive into problem solving is key, because that's really what procurement and production and sourcing is all about. And communication skills. Honestly, communication, like one of the biggest differences that I feel in this industry today versus when I started. When I started, we were doing blind costing online, like submitting to Target. They didn't know who the manufacturer was. They didn't know who, there was no relationship. There was no, there was no warm, fuzzy feelings, and you just submitted a bid online, moving kind of away from that and moving towards a relationship building, communication building. Really, students need to know that the information you give to the factories is only as good as what you're going to get back as what you give to them. So what is your expectations? How do you communicate? Always teaching that's, when you're communicating overseas, it's not their first language. So you really need to know how to communicate, and on the flip side of that is sustainability.
I know that's very important to you. So I was going to ask you about that. So go ahead. Tell us, I can just look, I read about your career and it's now a big part of your focus now. Tell us about that.
Yeah, sustainability really is a huge focus. It's not just a huge focus for Komar, it's a huge focus in the industry. Right now, there's EPR laws that are being passed state by state by state, and each state is passing different laws. So to be familiar with those laws, to be an expert in those laws. I mean, I tell my students all the time, you really have, if you can get into compliance, regulations, EPR laws, digital product passport, all of these laws and regulations that are coming and going to be passed at state levels, you have an amazing career ahead of you for people who really want to dig deep into this. Sustainability right now, really, it's not just something you want to do and it's a nice to do. It's really a have to do business. Retailers are demanding it, consumers are demanding it, regulations are demanding it. So it's coming. You can't be blind to sustainability anymore.
Yeah, it's funny, especially as we're talking to each other now, and and what's going on here in the U.S. DEI, maybe, I don't know if it's going away or it's less of a priority than it was in this administration than the last, but that's different than sustainability. And I think folks in sourcing, procurement, supply chain, that is not, you're right. That is not going away. The DEI stuff, that's a whole other issue. But sustainability, sometimes it gets, for whatever reason, it's tied to DEI. But sustainability, I think, in the business world that's not going away. And in your role, I got to imagine it's actually going to keep growing and growing as a bigger priority.
Yeah, and for us, really, we've had amazing success in sustainability we are going into these factories and partnering with them. We're not going into a factory and saying, you're not sustainable, we're not working with you. We're actually looking at factories who are true partners and going in, we're educating them. We're giving them the tools that they need to become successful, seminars. We're looking at improvements. We're not looking for you to be 100% sustainable and perfect. We're looking for factories who are true partners, who are going to help us achieve our sustainability goals and who want to partner with us.
Can I just ask you a question on this, though? And it's not like I don't believe in it. It's because I do. But how many times are you, when you book a flight now, it'll tell you how fuel efficient your plane is, right? Now, I'll notice it, but I can't say that I've ever said, oh, this plane wastes too much fuel. I'm not taking this plane. I'm going to take that. That's never happened, right? So how often have you personally felt it where a customer felt that you guys weren't being, sustainable enough and said, I'm not going to buy your products? Is that happening?
I don't think that that's happening, really. It's more so that we're being pushed. So I'll give you a great example, like on a personal, on a Komar level. We do a fabric, rayon spandex, and it's a fabric that we use in sleepwear and so many of our product lines, so many different brands, and it's so many different costing structures. From our low tier brands all the way to our top tier brands use this one fabrication rayon spandex. And, for years, we were trying to do a sustainable rayon spandex, a recycled rayon, for years. And every single time we would bring it up to our customers and we would say it costs 10 cents more, 20 cents more, whatever the cost was, they didn't want it. They would always go back to our original product. No, it's cost prohibitive. But we continued to know that it was the right thing to do. And we continued to work with top suppliers. We continued to provide projections. We continued to consolidate. How can we consolidate all the different fabrics that we're using to this one supplier so that maybe we can get a better cost? And at the end this year, we were able to achieve exactly that. We got a recycled rayon spandex, cost neutral. So that's really where sustainability and business practices came together.
Yeah.
Because it was the right thing to do for the business and it's the right thing to do for the planet.
All right. So let's close by, I want to ask you a couple of what I'll call lightning round questions and just sort of get your quick responses to these. What was your biggest learning in 2024?
Oh my goodness. It's expect the unexpected. Ooh, I mean, seriously, it's just, we don't know what's happening around the corner. 10%, 20%, what's the tariff?
Yeah, that's true. Next one, what's the most significant change in your planning and sourcing and procurement strategies that you've modified in the last 12 months?
That's actually major because it's China mitigation. I mean,
Mm.
that is the biggest focal point for us for 2025 is how to reduce our footprint in China, unfortunately. And that's what we're working really hard towards, with these additional tariffs, with these additional charges on logistics and ships and containers and all that. And we don't know what's happening around the corner. It's just the smart thing to do is to diversify more. We went from a much larger footprint in China down to, 20-30% of our footprint, which is amazing. And we're really working to reduce that even further and, go into other countries.
That's interesting. Next one, from a technology standpoint, I know the obvious answer is AI, but in the last 12 months, is there anything specific to technology that you can say has had an impact, was the most impactful in the last 12 months?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's this emergence of transparency. That's what everybody's talking about right now in the industry. When you look at a bra has 32 components. Let's just put that out there. 32 components in a bra.
I never noticed 32. I'm just going to say
32. So we need to know exactly every component. Can you imagine? It's not just about knowing your tier one supplier anymore. You need to know your entire supply chain. So transparency to me is technology's main kind of focal point.
And last, what has changed in the last year or so in how you're measuring success in what you do? Has there been any major changes compared to the way you used to measure success? You talked about it before. It was just not about cost. And so you sort of touched on that.
Yeah, exactly. I kind of touched on that. It's not about cost anymore. It's about keeping your margin, it's about not giving chargebacks back. It's about, not being late. It's about having the good quality. It's about having great designs that people want to buy. It's about shipping on time. So we're not getting charged back from our retailers. It's about having good quality. It's holistic. It's about profitability, resilience, sustainability, and innovation. It's kind of taking all of these points together. And it's not just about, I got the lowest cost and my garment came in on time.
Well, listen, I think, like I started off, I think you're in a fascinating industry, and I really appreciate you spending this time with us. I know we ran a little bit over, but this has been fun. And I'm going to keep an eye on Komar and see how you progress, both the company and yourself, and let's stay in contact.
Yeah, definitely. It was really great to be on the show. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great weekend. And to all our viewers and listeners, thanks for tuning in. And I'll see you on the next episode of Smarter Sourcing. Thank you.